Okay, hey, protectors, listen, how's it going? Want to welcome you to tonight's podcast. And listen, today I'm going to share with you guys how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu almost cost me my eye. Okay, so I'm going to kick their intro. We're going to be back in 30 seconds, and we're going to break this down. Hey, everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LaBeouf, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted murder to weaponizing my mind and body, mastering the tool of violence so that I can protect myself and my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Okay, short new intro. Very basic, but listen, for those of you that maybe are joining us for the first time, our podcast is starting to gain traction, and every Thursday night at 7:30, we go live. We've been previously going live on Facebook and then posting it to different social outlets and stuff, but we are changing it. Tonight marks the switch over to where we are going to be going every Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. We go live. We're going to stream right here on our YouTube channel. So please, if you're seeing this for the first time and you're enjoying what we're talking about, subscribe, follow along. We shut down our other YouTube channel. This is our main YouTube channel now, and we're just starting out growing this. So subscription, set notifications so that anytime we go live, you guys can follow along with us. And please like, share, comment. We love it. And this community has been growing over the last year or so, really growing over the last year with your guys' support. So having said all that, on Thursday nights, I do a bit of a strategy session where I have two of my coaches. We got Coach Dustin, Coach Brad. Dustin's in the middle, Brad's on the far side. And welcome, guys. I appreciate you guys and your time as usual. And let's kind of kick right into this here. So I said that tonight we're going to talk about how BJJ, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu almost cost me my eye. Now, obviously, I'm going to set it up with a little bit of a story. We're not just going to, I don't just want to tell the story of how I almost lost my eye using Jiu-Jitsu in a violent situation. Obviously, I want to set up some context, and then I want to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it is, the dominant martial art on the planet right now. I mean, the growth of it since the UFC first burst on the scene in 1993-ish, and just how it's grown over the years is unbelievable. And it's pretty much in every school in every city across the world and stuff, right? And I'll start off by saying I'm a big fan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but again, context determines the content. So this isn't by no means trying to bash Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or anybody that practices it. We do BJJ, but there is a massive difference in how we do it. It's really, I could have titled this, How I Discovered the Difference Between Jiu-Jitsu and Ground Fighting. Because they're two different things, at least by our definition, right? Jiu-Jitsu is the sport, Jiu-Jitsu is the art, and ground fighting is often referred to the aspects you pull that you use in a violent encounter or you use in self-defense. And again, we're going to differentiate even that. So anyways, if that all makes sense, let me start off with a bit of a story, right? I started training right around the time the UFC had just started. So 1993, 94, that was my first exposure into weaponizing. You guys know that prior to that, I had been doing, kickboxing. I'd grown up doing martial arts, karate style kickboxing. So then kickboxing, Thai boxing, sparring partner for two fighters. One was ranked 5th in the world at the time. Both went on to be like professionals. So I had the experience of martial arts and world-class training at a high level with professional athletes. And then I was in my violent assault, and you guys know, I didn't fucking get a single thing off. Nothing worked. None of the training. Violence is a completely different thing. As we like to say, it's its own language. What I'm building to is this. When I first started training in 1993, I was very fortunate because my instructors, my mentors, the guys that were teaching me the weaponizing process, they were at the time the hand-to-hand combat instructors for the U.S. Navy SEAL teams. They had worked with CIA, FBI, DA, like all agents, pretty much every tier 1 law enforcement military organization in the world was training with these guys. And so you got to remember, nobody heard about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu yet, but my mentors, my instructors, they had. You see, they had for the 5 years prior to the UFC, they had been doing private lessons in a garage in Southern California with Hicks and Gracie, who, even to this day is considered one of the greatest to ever do it. At the time, he was considered, literally one of the top Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes in the world, fighters in the world. And so they had, for 5 years, the Gracies were over in Southern California, and they were training not only with Rickson privately, but they were training with Horian and and Hoyce, and the thing is, there was nobody doing it. My instructors used to tell me that they'd go for a 1 hour, 2 hour private with Rickson, and then when the private was up and the time was up, they'd go to leave, and Rickson would grab them, drag them back in the garage, and make them stay for another 4 or 5 hours because he didn't have anybody else to train with, and he would just abuse them for some more. So where I'm getting at is that when I started in 1993, the UFC hadn't had the first UFC yet. And I was learning, and they were super excited. They're teaching all the close quarter stuff and edged weapons and impact weapons and mass attack and all the core weaponizing violence stuff. And then they're like, there's this new art, man. These Gracies, and they're teaching this this thing, and it plays a role in what we're doing. But of course, they are obsessed with it. So I'm learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The stream was very short. Rickson, Gracie, my instructors, and then me. And so I was getting this crash course in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that nobody else, the world just didn't even understand it. And even when it broke, even when they saw it in the first UFC, nobody wanted to believe it. So there was all the pushback that now you guys know the story. So, it took probably 5 to 7 years before you started getting some people going, holy fuck. It probably took 10 to 12 to 15 years for it really to get real traction and become kind of more mainstream. And now it is what it is today. And I say this because when we were in our training, we were pretty much doing what I would consider to be, they didn't call it they didn't differentiate. They didn't have what we call sport jiu-jitsu versus the combat jiu-jitsu. The Gracies they have a combatives program, right? That's typically where all their students start. You learn the 36 moves, you learn the Gracie combatives. And then from there, you progress through and move up in belts and stuff, and you learn more the chess match. You know what I mean? So the Gracie combatives is designed for what would you do in a self-defense situation, and then everything past that is more what would you do if you ran into another jiu-jitsu player, and it's more about playing the game and growing the skills and all that stuff. So what we were doing was just BJJ. It was just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was its core thing. Right from Rickson, stabilizing, destabilizing, understanding alavanca, leverage, pressure, all that type of stuff. If you guys, and for somebody that don't know, back in the day, nobody understood when a guy pulled guard, nobody understood the power of the guard, being on your back. The whole world was like, this is ridiculous. Why would you ever want to go to your back in a fight? You're just going to get your ass handed to you. But they didn't understand all of the advantages of being on your back and triangle choking, the setups and sweeps, and how you used, and the guard is very, very powerful, tons of submissions, all this type of stuff. So, here we are in 1993 doing jiu-jitsu in 93, 94, 95, and I'll just go in this 3-year window because we did it. I've been doing it ever since, but this 3-year period. And as a guy that is, doing an art that everyone now today understands how powerful it is, but back then the world didn't get it. And so my point is that when I would, leave training, come back to Canada, I could go, I'd be doing seminars or teaching people, or I remember I was teaching at the University of Alberta here for a number of years. And I could go there, and they had, judo clubs and Greco-Roman, wrestling, and they had all the different martial arts and stuff. And, I'd be in there working out, in the matted room working out, and you'd get black belts in judo come in, and black belts, or not black belts, but guys that were on the wrestling team and, had won championships and stuff. And they would see me and a couple of my students doing this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they always wanted to spar. And it was just, you tore through everybody. It was like having a secret weapon that nobody else understood. And I remember being able to go to seminars where you'd have 30, 40 people, and you could wrestle every single person there. I didn't care. It didn't matter how big they were. It didn't matter how tough they were. You just wrestled them because nobody understood it. And so you'd pull guard, you'd reverse, you'd sweep. They would instinctively do the exact opposite of what they should do. They would push. They would do all this stuff. And it was just, position and submission all day long. And I wasn't, at the time, again, I wasn't, we never did belt. I was just this guy who was training jiu-jitsu, but luckily my instructors were training with one of the best in the world. And what I'm driving to is there was that sweet spot where jiu-jitsu was the secret weapon. And I think even if you parallel our conversation tonight with the UFC, anybody that got on board early, the guys that like didn't deny it as much as they just, they went to Brazil. They sought out guys that like real BJJ practitioners and started to cross train with them. You saw something very powerful happen. You saw how effective the jiu-jitsu could be in the confines of a fight. And so the guys, very clearly, very early on, the guys that had that skill set had an advantage. And you'd see these BJJ guys, the black belts going around the country, going around the world doing seminars. And again, they could wrestle. You could have 100 people at a seminar and you could get, a guy that was really good and he could wrestle everybody at the seminar. But then what happened is as the world started to get on board and as people started to really understand the power of jiu-jitsu, something happened. And just so I'm not talking the whole time, why don't you guys, because you guys, you've been training me for over 2 decades, so you guys were on that earlier side of when jiu-jitsu was a very powerful thing. And I'm sure you guys really remember where a really solid foundation of good jiu-jitsu, like taught from a legitimate source, like it was coming through us from Hickson, where you understood sensitivity, alavanca, you understood positioning, you understood stabilizing and destabilizing. You didn't even have to worry about knowing all these submissions. When you could control someone's base and balance, stabilize, destabilize them, you didn't have to be good at submission. So you guys kind of remember that, but then there was a shift when the rest of the world started to figure it out. And maybe why don't you guys just at least give some feedback on what you remember from those early days and at the beginning of your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and that being integrated into weaponizing, because we're going to get to how it's changed to where we're at today. But don't jump there yet. Let's just go back to where it was in the beginning.
Yeah, I think for reflecting back on kind of the earlier days of training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like, again, when everybody started to do it, things changed, right? When everybody, because it was like you said earlier, it's like you had this secret weapon because it was like nobody knew about it. And then,
well, what do you remember about those times though? Let's keep on that part. What do you remember of the times when you knew jiu-jitsu and almost nobody else did?
People were wondering what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like even just like real quick, just people that I had as friends that didn't train. And when you have friends that don't train and they're like, oh, you're training, so like let's wrestle or let's do they weren't into any martial art or anything like that. So they're like, well, let's fucking wrestle. Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's wrestle. And they're like, what's this shit that you're doing? They didn't know what you were doing because it was like the friends that I'm talking about were just people that grew up wrestling with their brothers and stuff like that, right? So it's like then when you have skill sets and they're like, what the heck is this? And it was the reference point, the line familiarization, and it just wasn't there until people were able to see it and then start to practice it, right?
Yeah. So I just want to be clear with this, and then Dustin, you can jump in, right? But I can't overstress how dominant you were, like how dominant I was, you guys were, when nobody else understood the power of jiu-jitsu. Like what Brad's saying, like I remember going out and playing this football game just out in a field and there was like 50 people. And, I was always this tall, lanky kid, and this is a separate story, I guess, but I just remember these guys were like these massive, like these guys played football. Now we were just supposedly playing a friendly game of touch, which turned into tackle. And I remember just being these massive guys. And every time I'd catch the ball, these guys were trying to fucking tackle. Like they were, no one had pads on. I remember these guys were like trying to establish dominance. They were totally fine if they hurt me. And I remember one guy, this massive guy, smashed me, took me to the ground, like hit me, like tackled me in the ground. And he's on top of him and he's trying to like rub his forearm and push my face in the dirt. And I was like, fuck it. And I mean, it was pulled guard, I was fucking flipping him around. I had him in a triangle, spun him around, took his back, was choking him. You know what I mean? I just, spun him around and fucked him like he was my puppet. And I remember the other guys being like, fucking bullshit. And then every play, a new guy would come at me. And every time I just messed these guys up. Chokes and locks and this. And again, I wasn't even good at submissions, but I was really good at positioning. And these guys that outweighed me by 100 pounds, 60 pounds, were helpless. And that I want people to understand that, because that's where the love of jiu-jitsu was born from. In the beginning, no alteration was needed. Nobody knew. They didn't, you said it, but they didn't understand what you're doing. When you pulled guard, they thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. So they always did the dumbest thing they could do, which was exactly what we'd want them to do. It's like what was intuitive to do is the worst thing you could do in a way. And I want people to get it, because I want people to understand how much respect I have for the art. And Dustin, what was your experiences?
Just two really short stories, because they just summarize exactly what you guys have already said. But, you both touched on the fact that people just didn't know. People didn't know what jiu-jitsu was. It was so foreign to them. And an example I remember is, my brother Ryan trains with us, and we were both still living at home. And one night we're like, oh, let's go, go out front on the grass boulevard out in front of our dad's house. And we're like, oh yeah, we'll roll a bit, which that's how we always refer to jiu-jitsu. Let's go roll. So we went out front on the teardrop. It's like 11 p.m., middle of summer, so it's already kind of getting dark. And we're just out there in the grass rolling. And we're rolling for 20 minutes, half hour, something like that. All of a sudden a cop car rolls up. We're like, what the hell? The cops are like, what are you guys doing? We're like, oh, we're just rolling. Like, what's rolling? And so kind of explaining it to them, they're like, oh, well, the neighbors phoned the police because they didn't, they thought you guys were out here fighting, and they didn't know what was happening. And so it's kind of funny, and the cops thought it was funny, and they left. There's no big deal, but it just goes to show, the neighbor, the police, nobody had any idea what it was. It just looked so different, right? Yeah. And so they weren't sure, and it was nighttime, so they called the cops on us. Of course, but, yeah. But again, just goes to show, we've all had those experiences, though, of doing this at a time when it just wasn't familiar to people. Yeah. Especially if they didn't watch UFC and stuff like that, then it was nowhere on their radar. Yeah. And then the other story is, again, similar to yours. In university, a buddy of mine that I didn't know well, and we're hanging out one time on a weekend or something, and he's there with his other buddies. They're pretty big guys, and they're like, oh yeah, no, they goof around all the time, have a few beers, we wrestle, this and that, and but like Brad said, they're wrestling like they wrestle their brothers. Yeah. And so we get to talk, and I start telling about how I'm into the weaponizing process and all this stuff, and well, let's wrestle this and that. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, wait a minute, like you said, I was no great jiu-jitsu guy. Do you know what I mean? But I had a good foundation. I understood the basics, and destabilize. And these guys were bigger than me. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's see how this goes. And I didn't even understand the advantage I had until I did that. Until I did it, because I would only ever roll with you guys or other guys we trained with. And so I didn't have that contrast. So then to all of a sudden, to do jiu-jitsu against guys that wrestle, you know what I mean? And not Olympic wrestling, but just straight brother wrestling. Yeah. And yeah, like you guys said, I mean, just that ability to just school these guys, because they just had no concept. And all you come out of there just going holy shit, this is pretty awesome. Because it feels like that kind of secret weapon, because people just didn't understand how to stop it. Yeah. And it felt great in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we've covered that point. I could tell you even more and more stories. My kickboxing instructors, Trevor and them, I remember introducing it to them the first time. And Trevor talks about this openly. So, and we've talked about that when he was on our podcast before, but just when I first was telling him about jiu-jitsu, and he just, in his head, he said, I thought you were an idiot. If you try to do that to me, I'm bench pressing 500 pounds. You're 180 pounds. I'll snap you like a fucking twig. You know what I mean? And then we went down there, and all of a sudden he's caught in a triangle choke, which happened to turn into his favorite technique. And he was just flabbergasted. Let's do that again. I think he had to do that. It's like you run into a wall, and you're like, holy fuck, that hurt. But I'm sure I'll get through it next time. You just keep running into the brick wall. And, funny enough, now today he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if not even a first degree black belt at this point. But anyways, it was this massive resistance. It was this unknown thing. Brad mentioned line familiarization. The world just didn't have it. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm going to talk from the Gracie version, so Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, as it was in 1993, well, really before that, because they were training with Hickson before that, but it was just out of the box. Here you go. there's no need to alter this. The world doesn't know. So we didn't have to alter. So we had all of our stand-up, all of our edged weapons, impact weapons, close quarter, all the weaponizing, all the mass attack, all the stuff, all geared for violence, which had been streamlined by my instructors teaching SEAL teams, guys that were going into harm's way, right? That took something that was already streamlined like a flashlight and streamlined it to like a laser pointer. And then they just had this ground component. And they just took it and it just literally bolted right on. And it was like, yeah, because nobody knows. So you can pull guard and mess a guy up in fractions of seconds and control him, and it did all this stuff. So, we had this period of time where you just had this amazing weapon. But of course, as 93, 94, 95, and then 96, 97, 98, up to the 2000s, UFC started growing. It started becoming more popular, but it'd be starting to become more popular within the martial arts community. But it still wasn't this massive explosion. It was the guys that knew. Fighters started to look at it and go, I'm seeing the advantages. You just got to look at who's winning the fights. And mixed martial arts coming on, obviously, who's winning? What are the skill sets that they're bringing to the octagon or to the cage or to the ring or whatever situation? And so for us, it was still pretty powerful. But now this will bring me to the story I wanted to share, and then this is where we can talk about the change. And honestly, I don't really remember the exact year. I'd have to really think about it, but it was late 90s, like probably 98, 99. Potentially it was early 2000s. Really, I'd have to really think about this. But somewhere in that time frame, I remember that I had one of my instructors up here in Canada, and we were doing a seminar. And I would go down there. I'd move there. I'd be there for 3-4 months. Then I'd come home for a couple months. Then I'd go back for 3-4 months. This happened to coincide with me being home for 2 months. So I hadn't trained with him directly for about 2 months. We're always in contact, but I hadn't been down there to train with him in a couple months. And then so he came up, we were doing some training here, and then I was flying back with him to spend the next 3 months down there training and helping him teach and all that stuff. And so you got to think, this is only 2 months. And so we do this seminar. And after the seminar, it's the Saturday night, whatever, he goes back to the hotel because he's tired. And a bunch of us, we decide that we're going to go out. And so we go out just to this kind of pub, whatever. And there's 4 or 5 of us. And so, we get there. The second we walk in, we're walking, looking for a table. We see a table on the far side of the room. We start walking through. I'm in front. There's 3 or 4 guys behind me. And as I'm walking through, I see these 2 guys walking towards us. Now, the place is packed. So it wasn't like they were walking directly towards me, but, everything's tight and it's packed. There's like a fucking donkey trail through a crowded bar. So we're on one side of it, and this guy's coming, and he's going to pass us. But there's something massively different. Both these guys are stone-faced. They're just expressionless, eyes like focused, like they're going somewhere with passion and purpose. Now they weren't staring at me, but they were staring like almost through us. And I remember how stiff and straight their bodies were. And remember, I'm still pretty new into the weaponizing process, but I knew enough to recognize the pins, the threat cues, the body language, the behavior, interpersonal communication. So in the body language right away, I was like, something's up with these fucking guys. But again, they weren't zeroed in on me. But as we walked and we got closer, their body was so straight and different. And I remember right then, because one of our number one things we teach people to identify is you always look for the palm of the hands. Always, right? Why? Weapons.
If they're holding a weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Do they have something in their hands? They might still have a weapon on them, but is it in their hands? Is it active? Is it ready? Is it ready to deploy? And I remember, and it hit me. That's it. Their hands looked so fucked up. And then I realized that they were hiding their hands. I couldn't see their palms, and they didn't have them behind their backs, but they had them right stiff by their sides, as if they had something in their hands, and as if they were trying to hide whatever it was behind their legs as they were walking. And it was both hands, and it was both guys. And so I remember just like kind of pushing off the donkey path a bit, bumping into people a little bit more, and kind of trying to look to the side. And that's when I saw and noticed that each of them was holding a beer bottle, an empty beer bottle, but by the neck, like the long neck. So they're holding it by the neck and had the fat part of the bottle down. So they're holding it like they're going to smash somebody. And I saw this with 2 feet between us, like as it's coming. And so as they come, I'm seeing this, and I'm like, oh, fuck. And at that moment, it's like it was just enough time to go, oh, yeah. Like all the dominoes started falling. Oh, yeah, these guys are looking to fuck somebody up. These guys have weapons. Like, these guys are fucking serious about doing this. This is not a posturing thing. And so as we're walking by, again, they still weren't looking at me. Just as we pass, the guy, like, bumps in, like, shoves me. But, like, it wasn't a shove, like, bump, like, move out of my way. It was a shove, like, I'm going to shove you, and then I'm going to fucking destroy you. I'm going to bottle you. So as this guy bumps me, and I go off. Now, I haven't had a chance to say anything to anybody else, and they can't see past me. So they're clueless as to what's about to happen here. The 2 guys are not clueless. They're looking for something. So as he pushes me, he spins, and he goes to nail me with the first bottle. But luckily, because I had seen that, I actually was able, because we're so close and he pushed, I reached up, grabbed the back of his head, and shoved my thumb into his eye socket, right? So tie up, thumb and eyes under pressure went so. Grabbed him, and the first thing went in was a massive eye gouge, which is like perfect. Relaying injury, minimal effort in, maximum result. And as I nail him, right, he's recoiling from that, so the strike crashes and burns because now he's been hit with pain. But because they were both so primed, the second I was doing that, I had him, and I was trying to spin him to line him up. But because of the push, when I grabbed him and spun, it ended up spinning him, lining him up with my own friends. So his other buddy is tackling me. Luckily, he tackled me versus taking impact with the. I remember my first, I was bottled 6-7 times. I didn't want to repeat this shit. So he tackles me. So of course, the other guy, I let it come off the other guy. He's pushing me. And he's got these bottles still, and he's driving in, and we're going through people. And right in this moment, I had some stability. I mean, he pushed me, but I'd caught myself because, again, I saw enough of this coming that it wasn't a clean ambush. So as I'm basing my balance out, I could have very easily grabbed the back of his head and gouged the eye again, like done the same thing to him. But in that moment, as I felt that pressure, and I was just a little bit more back on my heels, right? I still had base and balance, but I was a little bit more on my heels. I could have recovered. But instead, intuitively, viscerally, without a thought process, my training kicked in. Now, in the first instance, my training kicked in and it was tight. Thumb and eyes under pressure wins fights. Boom, right into the eye socket, gouged the eye. Find the bridge of the nose, center it, push it in, all the way to the wrist, north, south, east, west. Okay? In this one, because my balance was a little bit more back, I pulled guard. Instantaneously. Jumped up in the middle of a crowded bar, like you got a concrete floor. Yeah, it's got that thin layer of carpet, but you know what a bar floor is like. Grabbed him in the guard, pulled him down, pulled guard. Executed it perfectly. So now we're down. And I have this guy in guard. All these people around. I don't fucking know where the other guy's at. Because I'm now just in the guard. My field of vision is pretty centered on the guy that's in my guard. But right away, I'm almost chuckling because my brain's like, well, you've got guard. He's fucked. Like he's not going to know what to do. And sure enough, these 2 bottles, what he does what everybody else was doing before this. 2 bottles in his hand, but he reaches up as if he puts the bottles kind of to my throat to push himself up so that he can sit up and then start bottling. So as he pushes up, with both hands here in my throat, again, intuitively, without a thought process, I grab his wrists, both my legs throw up onto his shoot up onto his shoulders, and I start pressing up, and I'm like double armbar. He's now being hyperextended, double armbar from the guard, right? I'm like, I'm gonna break both his fucking arms. He'll drop those bottles when when his elbows are bent back the other way. So as far as I'm concerned, remember, this is all happening fractions of seconds. Still have no idea where the other guy's at. No idea where any of my other crew's at. None of them. So I'm doing that, and I'm right at the apex, and I hear him start to scream. I hear him start to scream. And then all of a sudden, his buddy, who is back in, like, eyes swollen, all fucked up, but still back in the fight, jumps on his back. And so as I got my legs up and I'm extending my hips up, all of a sudden his buddy jumps back. Whew, guess what happens? My legs are now up by my fucking ears. I'm compressed like an accordion. I got compressed down. And I can't get my legs off his fucking shoulders. And my arms, which were stabilizing his hands, are now underneath all of that. So I can't get my arms up. And I can't get my fucking legs off. And this guy's on top of him. And I'm like, well, this is fucked, right? So I'm trying to shrimp to the side, move to the side. And then all of a sudden, it's like his buddy slides off him a little bit. So this guy is able to lift up a little bit. I'm able to get my legs down, and I'm able to get my hands free. And just as I did that, I'm thinking, okay, good. Now I'm going to shrimp. I'm going to do a sweep. I'm going to do all this other great jiu-jitsu stuff. And just as I'm about to do that, I see this flash. The guy that's in between my legs, his head's here in front of me, and I see this flash out of my periphery. And all of a sudden, I had my contacts in. From about here, all the way across the bottom of my eyelid, all the way to the bridge of my nose. So from the outside, about an inch outside my eye, right underneath the whole bottom of the eyelid to my bridge of my nose, the bottle had broken that he was holding, and that sliced me from the outside of my eye all the way across. I mean, millimeters missing from slashing my eye. And I felt this shoosh, this cut, and I knew instantaneously. The flash of it, the darkness, I knew it was the bottle, and I knew it had broken. And then I see from behind this guy in front of me, I see this hand of his buddy winding up to come back in again. And in this moment, the best way I can describe this is like, I woke the fuck up. I was doing viscerally exactly what I'd been trained to do. My base and balance was compromised a little bit. I was leaning back. I pulled fucking guard. The second I pulled guard, this guy went to push off, like choke kind of thing, push himself off, threw the legs up right away, had a double armbar, could have submitted him, could have broken his fucking elbows, got rid of all that shit, done perfectly. Then all of a sudden, chaos ensues. It's not a one-on-one fight. You're on the back. You're trying to do this fucking jiu-jitsu move, and there's another guy sitting on top of the guy, and then all of a sudden a bottle that had broken, which is the equivalent of a knife, comes raking across, just about lose your fucking eye. And all of a sudden, when I say I woke up, and all of the violence training came back. All of the thing, go to fucking 10. Stop fucking around. What are you doing trying to armbar people? What are you trying to do to position and set people up for submissions? What the fuck are you doing? And the guy in front of me was, boom, straight, thumb in the eye again. He went flying back, trying to get his fucking eye off my thumb. And as he went flying back, the other guy was kind of down on his knees with the bottle, trying to swing over. And as he went over, was able to shuffle forward, put the heel of my foot straight through his fucking nose. His nose exploded. He went flying back. And in a fraction of a second, an eye gouge and a heel stomp, a heel kick to the face. And all of a sudden, then doing a perfectly executed, ground get up. And now you're back up on your feet. And then it was able to instantaneously, a couple knees, couple elbows, relay some destruction. These guys were no longer a threat. They'd been neutralized, and then out of there. Out the back door, my 4 or 5 friends who, like, this all happens in fractions of a second. They were all like, what the fuck just went down? And so, boom, we get out of there, car go, boom. And, there's a little bit of aftermath to that, but nothing legal-wise. Just these 2 guys had to then be taken to the hospital. And I guess real quickly, what I found out a few days later was that these guys had actually assaulted people in, I think it was 2 or 3 other bars that night, and they had done it the 2 or 3 previous weekends. They had just gone out, walked in, grabbed empty beer bottles, walked around, fanned somebody, and just fucking started beating the shit out of them with bottles. Had put people in the hospital, severely injured people, and this was just them looking to do the same thing again. And so what I'm sharing with this is where the real moral of the story comes, or I guess the lesson. So after that, of course, I phoned my instructor who's in the hotel room. And so I go over there and we're talking, and he's like, holy fuck, like he's helping me. You're going to have to go to the hospital. You're going to have to get stitches. You're lucky this. And so after all that, we're talking. And he goes, and I'm like, fuck, man, like, I pulled guard. Like, I pulled guard, and I'm telling him the whole thing. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, that's why we don't do that anymore. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, we stopped training that way. We stopped training pulling the guard. We still obviously know how to use guard, and we still train guard. And you might have to, in certain situations, pull the guard. But what we realized because of situations like yours, what they'd encountered is with some of their military guys, the way that you're training, they had started to develop the instinct to, the second they were in this clinch position, pull guard. And yet things were changing. You know what I mean? In mass attack, it doesn't work the same way. And there's enough people that were starting to figure out how to counter guard and turn it into a fight. And you don't want to be in a fight in a life and death violent altercation. You don't want to be in a fight, because a fight is back and forth. It's give and take. It's give and receive. You know what I mean? And he's like, yeah, we don't do that anymore. I mean, what do you mean you don't fucking do that anymore? Like, I didn't get the goddamn memo. You know what I mean? Like, I've been gone for 2 fucking months. We talk all the time. Why didn't you tell me? He goes, well, listen, no, we're not training to instinctively pull guard like that. And we're no longer training to go to mount, to take mount. And it's like, mount's one of the most powerful positions on the ground when you achieve, and it was easy to get people to get to the mount, and people were fucked because they didn't know how to get out. He goes, yeah, but it changes. And what happened to a couple guys, a couple operators in the field, in a combat situation, went to the mount. And then all of a sudden, shit mutated, turned into mass attack, and the guy in the bottom didn't know what the fuck he's doing, but grabbed onto his gear and his equipment. And when he was in the mount, it's tough to get off the mount when you got 3 other guys and you only have 180 degrees of vision. So they're like, no, now we're just going partial mount, like knee up on stomach, where you have almost, you got closer to 360 degrees. It's easier to frame off and get off the guy. So there was this point in time where the evolution demanded the shift, where the jiu-jitsu straight out of the box was losing its advantage. It still offered a tremendous amount of advantage, but now you had to start altering. And I'll pause there for a second, because if you guys, I know you guys, I want you to think back, because you both were around when I came back and was like, shit's changing. We're changing how we're doing things, because the way you train is the way you fight. These neuro-associated conditions, stimulus response. So the second somebody gets in a clinch and you're back a little bit, pull guard. Versus understand how to base off, how to move, how to zone left or right, get the thumb back in the eye, get the headbutts, elbows, you remember the shift. So I want you now to talk a little bit about what you guys remember from that period of time where the shift became important, and then even feel free to carry it through to, other things that have happened and what you guys have kind of experienced off that.
I think that, like, what it really, to kind of go back and reflect it, it's like really in that moment was identifying, well, what's the problem that we're facing? Like, what's the challenge? And it's like having that and being like, well, how do we take what we know and apply that to the challenge, to the problem that is at hand? Because it's like we had something that was extremely powerful. People didn't know how to deal with it. They weren't line familiarized. And it was successful in most situations, right? But when you find yourself in your story, it shines a gleaming light on. It's like, okay, so now we need to make sure, like, nobody's disputing that ground tactics are necessary and are still extremely powerful, but just needed to be changed or tweaked for the theater of operations, for the evolution of what people are doing. Like, now, if those guys would have had, like, that was premeditated, right? So,
Yeah.
So, like I said, like, there's a lot of situations where, yeah, it works. But again, look at the severe cases that you found yourself in. It's like, no, it's like, do what you need to do against the most severe situations, change, alter, make tactical decisions on how to utilize those skill sets. Because when it's a less severe, when it's not life and death, when it's not violent, you still have the most severe way to apply that. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. For me, I remember like when you first kind of told that story, and it was easy to make an instant shift, like mentally, because as you guys know, like a secondhand experience is just as powerful as a firsthand experience, and you hear that story, and it's very easy to put yourself in that situation and essentially live it, and so it's very easy mentally to be like, oh yeah, nope, done with mount, done with pulling guard, like you don't have to sell me on that, like the story sold it all. And it was no different than when I started doing all of this, and I've shared that story many times, where you come from a taekwondo background and you see one thing and you get a perspective shift of like, okay, well, when people take you to the ground, it's like, what do you mean when people take you to the ground? I don't have a solution for that. And this was the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, when you pull guard on someone and they do this or that, it's like, what? Oh yeah, shit. If that happens, I'm screwed. And so right away you just make that instant shift. And so I remember mentally having that shift at this time when the training changed. And the other thing that kind of made me think of is just in talking about like going from jujitsu to now what we would just more refer to as like ground fighting, essentially, not now, but over time, started talking about it that way. And I just thought of like one drill we've always done through the years that I think very quickly demonstrates the difference is if you walk up to two guys doing jujitsu and you throw a training blade on the ground next to them, how much that changes. That doesn't look like jujitsu anymore. Not the way people know it as a sport, as a combative, kind of art. It changes very, very fast. And all of a sudden you start to see the roots come out of now it's all about stabilize, destabilize, either get the blade or get the hell away from the blade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that drill is extremely powerful for, it's kind of like a picture says 1,000 words. I think that drill does the same thing.
And one thing I'll just throw out there, Dustin, to help people, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, we do that. Like if me and my buddy are doing like rolling with jujitsu, somebody throws a knife in and then we start wrestling over the knife. In the beginning, we used to do this. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but better than a knife is go get a bug zapper, one of those powerful, electric bug zappers, and use that instead of a training blade. Because the training blade, people get it and they wrestle for it, but you don't have the same incentive because then guy goes, aha, I'm cutting you, I'm stabbing you. Get something that inflicts some pain. Go get a cattle prod, like a cattle prod. You don't want to get hit with a fucking cattle prod. Get a fucking taser, get a bug zapper, get something where when that guy gets it, and if he gets it uninterrupted even for a few seconds, and he's pressing that to your face and zapping you, you'll wrestle differently. Then you'll see jujitsu change. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's closer to punches. So a lot, because I've seen guys that go, oh, we wrestle over the blade. And I'm like, you're doing jujitsu and you guys are cooperating in a weird way because there's nothing really, you still can't make it real what that's like, what the pain is. What are the consequences for losing a wrestling match? What are the consequences for losing? Now some people get it, right? You can have an arm broken, you can have a neck broken, you can have knees, and like you can have your joints fucked up. You blow a guy's knee out or ankle out or arm out, that's injury, right? But it's again to get the context is what changes with it. So I thought I'd just throw that because there's people out there that are wanting to weaponize for the street, and it's like, well, when you're doing your ground, you have to have, there has to be a pain penalty for getting into the, for the cooperative sports side. You have to have something that motivates people to move differently, to understand that I can't just sit here and do this or whatever, right? So that's just a little offshoot. But okay, so with that too, like I deem this way, and this is an important point to make. The first area, like when we started it and I went up to, let's say 1995, it was like take people to the ground because they don't fucking know. And you can just, like, even if you had mass attack, you could oftentimes get a guy on the ground and fucking armbar him, choke him, sweep him, elevate. Like, you could do so much shit to him fast because they didn't have a clue what they're doing, even if they're big. You could spin them around, take their back, choke them out. You could get back up. You had time to fuck somebody else up because nobody knew what to do. So it was like, in the beginning, it was like, go to the ground.
That was the crocodile grabbing the prey on the riverbank while it's taking a drink and sucking in and taking it underwater.
100%.
That's what ground was back then.
Yes, death roll. That's beautiful. Let's call that the death roll era, right? Because that's a great analogy. You'd grab the fucker, pull him under the water, death roll his ass till he was done, and then you'd come up and be like, I'm not even tired. Like, I can do this again and again and again, right? And it was awesome. Or you could be nonviolent with him, whatever. But let's say after the 95, so somewhere between the 96, 97, 98, up to the 2000s, whatever, when I had that experience and there was the shift and it was all of a sudden, don't fucking go to the ground. Almost losing my eye that way was like, this is the second time that a bottle almost took my eye. And it was like, so again, it was touching the hot stove, one trial learning. No fucking more of this. Here's the point I want to make. Even when we went into the era, do not fucking go to the ground. In a violent situation, I want to stay the fuck on my feet. I don't give a shit. I'll fight my ass off to stay on my feet. During that time frame, we did even more fucking jiu-jitsu than we did in the beginning. We trained it harder. But the way we trained it, it's not what you do. We did jiu-jitsu still. My instructors were still training with the Gracies. I was still training with them. Matter of fact, you got to meet guys like Wellington Diaz, Megaton, and Mark Eckards, and all these other guys. Roy Harris, all these guys, and Sensei Yuri Nakamura out of the Nisanto Academy, and like just all of these amazing Ron Beliki, shoot wrestling, like all of these guys. We double, if not triple, down on our ground skills. But the way we trained it, we didn't build the operant conditioning. We changed the stimulus so that we had no stimulus that told us, take him to the ground. Because we didn't want to be in the ground because the mass attack, environment, stairwells, all weapons, all kinds of shit. But if environmental factors like where we live, ice, gravel, terrain change, you just get overwhelmed in the blitz and they take you down, whatever it is, the second we were going down or knew, fuck, I have no choice, down we went and we were solid. Then the whole thing was stabilize, destabilize, inflict fucking pain, and get the fuck back up. The whole thing was do not roll with them, get up. Do not roll with them, get up. Stabilize them, put some fucking, get that eye gouge in there, stabilize them, find, one of the 144 areas on the body to fucking bite a hole through the guy. Nibble, not tear, chew, or shred a hole through the fucking guy. As the guy's screaming, trying to pull away, get the fuck back up. So even though we spent all this time rolling and developing sensitivity and building the Alavanca and the positioning, when it came time to building the stimulus response, all of the original stuff that was, what do we call it? The death roll shit. Go to the ground, take him to the ground. We have a secret weapon. Take him to the ground and destroy him, death roll him. That all left. Not pulling the guard, not trying to slip to the mount. Like you might go through mount, get to the other side, 360 degrees of vision. It was all about how to get back up off the guy, all of that stuff. How to inflict injury, how to elbow properly, how to punch properly. We were doing, ground and pound to get back up type stuff, right? Inflict pain, get up. Stabilize, destabilize, inflict pain, get up. That's the formula of jiu-jitsu. So that era happened for us. And here's this weird thing in between that. While we were in that era and the way we were weaponizing was to not go to the ground. Develop the counter strategies to stay up. And I'm just going to throw some out there because Henry Gracie says all the time that like in a street fight, the last place you want to be is on the ground. But who better to teach you how to get off the ground, how to avoid being taken to the ground than somebody who that is their area of expertise. He always says it's like, imagine if you fall in the pool. Who better to teach you how to get to the edge of the pool so you can get the fuck out and not drown than someone who's an expert in swimming. Like, and that's the thing. So the Gracies agree with what we're talking about. The philosophy is, listen, you don't, especially in a real critical situation, you don't want to be on the ground. But it's going to happen. People are going to take you there. You're going to slip and go, like whatever it is. But you want to get up. Where the difference is that in the training, you develop a stimulus response, an operant conditioning, like what happened to me, that the second you're in a position, you're actually working to take him to the ground. Fighters, constantly, you can watch mixed martial arts, and yeah, they'll stand up and fight, but they also are like, the second maybe that's not going well, they're trained to shoot in and get the takedown, so get him to the ground. So again, the context determines the content. So we can talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we can talk about the art, but everyone has to remember that what's the context? If you're just talking about it as an art and two jiu-jitsu competitors doing nothing but jujitsu, sport jujitsu, and rolling with each other. It's one of the most beautiful high-level chess match things. It's amazing. It's amazing athletics. It's amazing art. It's an amazing thing. If you're talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the context of one-on-one sport-based competition and fighting, it changes from the pure sport side of it when there's no punching, just jiu-jitsu. Now you've got the boxing, the Thai boxing, all of that stuff mixed with the Olympic wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, and it changes. Still, there's an amazing, beautiful display of attributes and knowledge and skill, and it's integrated in all this great stuff. But then there's the context of combat, of violence, where people are trying to kill you. People are trying to murder you. Two guys with 2 bottles in each hands, trying to, like, having no problem stabbing you, like, whatever. Like, the content changes, but it does not diminish the value that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brings. It still has value. It has a tremendous amount of value. But how you train, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's the training that changes it. And that's where we really, that's the era we're in now, because let me put this out there, and I'd love to get your guys' feedback on it. And, you know, we know how we're training it now, but I'd love to hear you frame it in your own words, share your truth of it. Let me ask this question first. What do you do when the entire world starts to play the same game? Because that's where we're at.
For me, the thing that hit me just instantaneously, viscerally, is consent. Because I think that's the biggest shift lately. You know, like, as you go through the 3 eras we're talking about, this kind of 3rd era that we're now in is you can't consent. When people are bigger, stronger, and now arguably better on the ground than we are, even though we've been doing it for decades, you can't agree to it. You can't agree to match skills and go toe to toe now on the ground. No different than how we talk about it in stand up. It's like you cannot consent to do it with them. So now all your ground skills have to be brought to avoid getting into a jiu-jitsu fight in the middle of a violent situation. Yeah. You can't do it. It'll get you killed.
Yeah. If I can throw this out there, because people might not understand this, and without being able to demonstrate it here, like, you can train we train jiu-jitsu, like, you train jiu-jitsu. So it's not what you do, it's how you do it. You train jiu-jitsu to learn how to use your jiu-jitsu to never have to use jiu-jitsu. So, you know, someone else, all these people, the whole world, man, is like, I mean, relatively speaking, like, people understand this now. People, when they see a guard, even people that have never done jiu-jitsu know what the fuck it is because it's popularized. It's in the mainstream. Just like back in the day, you got guys watching boxers. Boxing's been around forever. You know, even if a guy never knew how to really throw a punch, he knew to put his hands up. He knew what it was kind of like. And now they know what a guard is. Now they know what a mount is. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean when I say the whole world now understands this shit. But your jiu-jitsu, you just can't, you have to, it's how you do it. You learn to not consent. And that's one of the things to do. If people watch us roll, we can roll with each other for positioning, sensitivity, understanding to leverage the alavanca, conditioning, all these things where we roll with each other. We don't do submissions. We don't worry about submissions. Because if you understand how to position and you understand how to trap and you understand how to, like, you know, secure things and stabilize and destabilize, you don't even have to be that good at submissions because position leads to submission. So at the end of it, you can sit, I got a guy all wrapped up and his arm's sticking out. I can go, well, I could break it like that. Let me figure this out here. You have all the time to go, oh, there, that would break it. But so we can roll that way, and we do for the sensitivity, leverage, all that stuff. But then we take all of that sensitivity, the alavanca, the sensitivity, the positioning, the understanding that, and we learn how to, when one guy is trying to say, let's wrestle, your frames are going, not a fucking chance in hell. I'm doing this to destabilize you or stabilize you, inflict pain so I can get the fuck back up. So we always say it's like a kid that doesn't want to get picked up. You ever try to pick up a kid that doesn't want to be picked up? It's very fucking tough to do. Brad's living it right now. That was 2 hours ago. But that's how it feels. And it's like, you know, And people be like, Jesus, like, roll with me, man. Let's just do jiu-jitsu. Let's see who's better at jiu-jitsu. It's like, I can't because you are better. Just like in stand-up. I'm not going to box with you. That's why we don't use boxing and kickboxing and Thai boxing, because the whole fucking world's playing the same game. Which means you'll lose. Because there's not a couple people that are bigger, stronger, and better. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are bigger, stronger, and better. Younger. Whatever. You've got to change the game, which is the whole thing of weaponizing, is strategy driven. So that you don't ever have to fight these people, because if you have to fight, again, like majority of people watching this and listening to this, I did a podcast today on about how to weigh risk and talking about zeroing the risk. The majority of people, maybe men are in denial. You're not a premier tier 1 athlete, like mixed martial artist and fighter. Those are very few people that hit that pinnacle level. Now you might go, yeah, but I'm 5'6". I'm in that high, like I'm a really fucking good amateur. Now they go pro and they fight pro, but as far as that, you're just a really good amateur still compared to the premier pros. So you can go pro, but it doesn't mean you're pro. You're not world class. But how many people is that even? You go to a training gym that has 300 people, an average size training gym, 250 to 300 people, 350 people. How many premier professional fighters do they have in that gym? Some gyms, 0. How many really good pros do they have? Maybe 1. How many really good, really solid amateur athletes do they have? 4 or 5, maybe. And they have those for 3-4 years before they're married, kids, injuries, move on, have to earn a living, whatever. How many hobbyists, 1 to 3s, do they have? People that like it, show up, they do it for 3 to 4 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then they get out and they're good. They're good. They can go to a couple interclub tournaments. Hundreds. So all of a sudden now you're talking about someone that goes, I'm just gonna go to fucking 10 on you. You can't fight. And anyone that thinks you can if it's an altercation. In antisocial violence, you can totally do it. In asocial violence and antisocial aggression, you could do it, right? Because you're level 3 against someone that doesn't know anything and isn't a fucking predator, isn't a killer. Well, yeah, it works. He's drunk. He's drunk and he's mouthing off, trying to be tough in front of his friends. He's done a year of jiu-jitsu. And now you've done 3 years of kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, so you pop him in the mouth. And then you guys have this big fight, and 75 punches are thrown and 1 connects. And at the end, that's the guy who's the winner. And everybody yells shit, goes home, and everybody's like, oh my God, violence. And it's like, it wasn't violence. That was antisocial aggression. That was egos. That was about trying to hurt each other and mostly trying to hurt their ego or their pride. Nobody was really invested in injuring people. That's a whole different fucking animal. That's a guy in a Greyhound bus who cuts the other guy's head off and eats his organs. That's violence. That's the comparison. Don't fucking confuse that shit. Getting a fat lip in a bar fight by some fucking loudmouth posturing gangbanging wannabe is different than a gangbanger, you know what I mean, fucking hacking you up, 3-4 guys bum rush you with fucking machetes and start chopping you to pieces. And people think, both the Greyhound bus and the machete chopping all happened. All happened here in Canada. And that's just too, you guys get it, right? But I want people to understand the contrast. This is why shit has to change, because the context fucking matters. So hopefully what we've done is people will ask me, what do you think about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Or do you guys do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Of course. But we have to talk context before we can talk art. Stop talking style in front of everything. Stop talking style. There is I can't remember his name. There's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, one of the top guys in the world, like an 8-time champion, Laredo, I think his name is. But he was just murdered in Brazil. And he went out they were at a concert, and he was in his VIP room, and this guy come up and started acting fucking erratic and aggressive and being kind of crazy. And so what did he do? As an 8-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, he had 0 problems. He took the guy down, held him on the ground, and told the guy to fucking calm down. Held him there to the guy, calm the fuck down, man. Like I guarantee his pulse probably wasn't even up. That was effortless to him. And then the second the guy complied and calmed down, when he got up and got off him, the guy also stood up, I'm sure, in a very calm manner, pulled his gun out and shot him in the fucking head. And then while he was lying there dead, walked over and kicked his fucking body as he was lying there dying with a bullet through his head. Like, now, was that a failing of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? No. It was a failing of understanding context. You know what I mean? What's one of our core things? A guy comes over and starts acting erratic. It was very anti-social aggression in the beginning. Like a guy walks over and starts, and he's fuck you, blah, 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 and he's grabbing your bottles off the table and he's being a fucking dickhead. So you're not seeing the signs that say this guy wasn't waving a gun around. He wasn't threatening to shoot and kill them. He was being a dick. But the second that he grabbed him and put him on the ground, what happened? By our definition, you've had now, when the guy walked over, started being erratic, you've had disengaged conflict. You've had conflict. What is conflict? The second you've had conflict, remember, it could be verbal, it could be physical, it could be verbal and physical, whatever it is, the second you've had conflict, what do we know starts to happen?
It's going to escalate up.
It's going to mutate.
The point of no return.
Violence is always trying to escalate up. So even if it's antisocial aggression in the beginning, it's egos, it's erratic. I don't know nothing to this guy's just being an erratic idiot. But the second he engaged him and physically put him on the ground, he has to understand that this is conflict in the real world. This is trying to mutate to violence. This is not a sport. This is not a dojo. This is not a thing where you get, hey, calm down. The referee, okay, clearly you win, you're the champion. You know what I mean? When we got, for me, if I had to control the guy, which was the right thing to do, he should not have hurt, like he didn't have to, he took control of him, calmed down. Either A, he should have stayed in control of him until security came, until law enforcement came, until people could secure him, arrest him, remove him. The danger's there. You don't get off anybody in a real world situation. You don't get up and then stand there expecting that this guy now, you whip a dog that's going crazy, you whip that dog and then stand there and expect that dog not to fucking bite you? The second you got the muzzle off it, you put the thing around its neck, you pin it to the ground, the dog finally calms down, you take the lasso off, you pull the pole back, dog jumps up and bites you and everybody's surprised? We would have removed ourselves instantaneously. Don't stand there, admire your fucking handiwork. Don't stand there assuming he knows that I can control him, so what threat is he to me? Do you see the limitations? The context of talking style. And like same as me, pull guard. Pull guard, control, I'll do this, and look what happens. You go to a 6 or a 7, and they go to a fucking 10. Inherit all that risk. The second I got off him, I'd have been fucking out that fucking door. I'd have been holding him, telling all my people, everybody out. Get the fuck out, get the cars ready, get everybody get out. If somebody's not coming to get him, if there's no police coming, if there's no security coming, whatever, then the second I let this fucker go, it's a straight round. Pay our fucking bill while I sit and hold this guy. I don't care what you got to do. The second I'm up, everybody wants out of there, we're fucking gone. Because I'm leaving zero opportunity. I'm going to zero my risk. I assume this guy's going to want retribution and revenge. And you know how you know? Because after he shot him in the head, he didn't turn and walk away. He walked over and degraded his body by kicking him twice. Fuck you, hold me down in front of everybody. Fuck you, tell me to calm down. Fuck you, threatening to go. Fuck, you know, you can feel the rage of what that guy was thinking. But again, you know, I had a conversation with somebody about this, and everything they talked about was stuff. What would you do different in your jiu-jitsu training? What would you do different in this training? And it was like, stop talking style. Style, and if people can understand, the style has nothing to do with this. It was perceptual mindset of it's context training. Our context is different by how we do things. But when you train your context for sport, that bleeds over because that's the only context you know. And with that, that's how you never go 10. You're always going to inherit risk. Because the violent guys, they just go 10. They're not trying to play a game with you. They're not trying to fight you. They just want to fucking destroy you. And so that's a story that really showcases how antisocial aggression handled it well, but he had context determined. He had missing pieces of the puzzle that the sport stayed with him when he got up and expected a sense of honor. I have fair and square controlled you, established my dominance over you. I am the superior martial artist. I am the superior fighter. And so now you will respect that and you will leave, or I will be forced to expand and go to the next level with my martial skill. And that guy got up, went, boom. It's like, I'm not a martial artist. You're correct on that. You know what I mean? And I think I heard reports that the guy was a fucking cop, an off-duty cop or something. I don't know. I haven't followed up on it, but. So anyways, hopefully that is clear for everybody that when we talk about it, I would never bash Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I'll never talk, we don't need to talk style. We need to talk context. Because context determines the criteria by which we're going to judge the effectiveness of an art. And the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if it's this big in the context of sport, it's this big in the context of like when you're fighting like mixed martial arts, right? Because you can't use all the same techniques in Jiu-Jitsu when someone's trying to punch you in the fucking mouth. And then it goes to this big when you talk about the context and violence. But what is there in each of those areas, it is without a doubt one of the most, has amazing strategies, tactics, and tools. But you can't just talk style. It's not just BJJ and it's all the same. And you just do it for whatever you need when you need it. It doesn't work that way. That's perceptual. That's meaning. That's what you focus on, what the meaning is. That's the context determines the content. Okay, anything else you guys want to throw in on this?
Yeah, just real quick. I just want to. You made a comment about like, well, what do you do when everybody in the world is doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And maybe there's some people out there that are thinking, like, yeah, but like most of these people are good people that are training Jiu-Jitsu and whatever. But I just want to, which doesn't really matter, but I want to pull us from a quick story from one of our other instructors that works in the correctional facilities. And it's like, there's people that spend all day in solitary confinement that roll up their mattress and are training what they know to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, ground and pound, and all that shit to do what? To destroy people. Yeah. So everybody's like, it's out there to the point where it's like, this is what these guys do. They're solitary confinement all day, just fucking training. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or ground and pound and to do what? So when they get out, or if they're attacked in prison, but like everybody's doing it. Like it's one of those things that
The second anything becomes popular enough that people have a blueprint for it, even if they've never done it, their brain has a blueprint. They can mimic what they've seen. And you get a guy big enough, strong enough, crazy enough, fucked up on bath salts, whatever, and now when you're on the ground trying to brother wrestle, all of a sudden he slides into a mount position and starts raining fists down or grabs a bottle or a brick and starts smashing on your head. He doesn't have to be that fucking good. And again, if you have willingly and are currently engaging him and rolling with him, going, I will eventually outposition him and get to a position of leverage where I can trap something up and submit him or negotiate with him, you're going to be in for a pretty rude awakening when shit mutates and you don't have the time, nor do you have the cooperation, nor are you getting instinctive movements like you'd expect from having only ever wrestled other people that are doing it, other people that are Greek consenting, like Dustin said, consenting. It's different. The context determines the content. And I'll say that till we're blue in the face, because it's an element that it should be one of the first things people talk about when you come and say, what are you training for? Well, what's the context? Not what style are you training, what's the context of your training goals? This changes. I would like to be a world champion. In what? Mixed martial arts. I'd like to be a world champion in what? Sport jiu-jitsu. I'd like to be a world champion in what? Kickboxing. Context determines content. It's so fucking simple and clear. But the problem is that the content the world is seeing on Instagram and Facebooks and YouTube and everything else, all of the content comes from the context of sport. And even the people that are saying, I'm teaching street self-defense, this is not a sport, they were trained in the context of sport. And then they're going, but we're going to put a bite in here or gouging or whatever. And it's like, you're still just teaching style because you still think style is what works in violence. And style can work in violence, but I hope you're a great athlete. I hope you're young, powerful, got great endurance. I hope that you have great elasticity in your skin and your joints and, because the second you start getting older and now the criminals are the younger, show me a style where the reigning champion is in his 70s. Why? Now, you look at someone like a Randy Couture, who's older. He couldn't get back in and fight at the premier elite level, but I bet that guy can still whoop the fuck out of a lot of practicing martial artists. But the point is that age will take you out of it. You're going to start going down. When you're training for violence and you're working off strategy, I can tell you story after story of 80-year-old women, 85-year-old women that had some guy, sexual predator, break into their house, young, strong, big fuckers who have a violent criminal history, breaks into their house, and they're fucking shoving knitting needles through the guy's eye socket. They're rupturing fucking testicles. They're biting holes in the side of his face and sucking fluid out of his fucking lungs. And they did it all by feigning cooperation. They had a ruse. They played up their vulnerabilities. I just need my cane. Bam! And then, all of a sudden it's like relaying injury. I mean, like, at what age does the cunningness and desire to fucking live, what age does that deteriorate? Well, depending on your mindset, it doesn't have to at all. You know what I mean? I could look at myself in my 20s, how I would have defended myself, versus in my 50s now. I'm just like, you know what? When I was 20 and doing all this training and had like all this jiu-jitsu, all this, I could have done this, I could have done that. Now in my 50s, where everything's a little more this and that, fuck it. I'll just do this. I don't have to fight this guy. I'll just cheat. I'll just go straight 10 and cheat. I'm not inheriting any risk. Because also as a man in my 50s with no criminal record, I know what my morals are. I understand when I'm legally and morally justified. I know my rights. And when I'm within my rights, when it's legally and morally justifiable to do it, I'll do whatever it takes to neutralize that threat, up to and including taking life to preserve my life. 9 out of 10 times when you go 10, nobody has to die, but that's their choice, not mine. Right? You can neutralize that threat by speed, surprise, and violence of action. And oftentimes, in a matter of a few seconds, they're not the threat, and you're out of there. So in a lot of ways, you do less damage because you're willing to do infinite damage. Anyways, this was a good talk, guys. Any final thoughts?
Nope. I think you wrapped it pretty good there for me anyway.
Okay, perfect. Okay, guys. That is it. Thank you guys so much. Coach Dustin, Coach Brad, appreciate you guys. Appreciate your time. Again, every Thursday night, we will be on live. The three of us will be here live on Facebook. Sorry, live on YouTube. We're YouTube now. So hopefully you guys can join in. Maybe remember to subscribe, set your notifications for any time we go live. I also am going to be doing a lot of live podcasting myself throughout the course of the week, so there'll be lots of content coming your way. We hope that you enjoyed tonight, and if you did, please like, share, comment, follow. That's how we're growing this organization. Our whole mission, again, is our passion, and my passion is to share insights that I've personally used, that both Brad and Dustin have used and are using, and all of our clients. These things allowed me to go from, being the victim of a brutal attempted murder to mastering the tool of violence, weaponizing my mind and body. Not only has it given me infinite safety, confidence, and certainty in my life, but it has transformed me and allowed me to become a much better father and husband and member of my community than ever would have been possible. You understand and get in touch with your violent side. It demands that at the same time you become more empathetic and compassionate in this world because you understand what is at risk. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm happy to share it with you. Thank you guys again for your time, and we will see you all next time. So stay safe, stay weaponized, chat again soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.